Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here with our next lesson. We are moving on to a new unit. It's got some big changes in it, and that's kind of the theme of it is expansion and development. With that being said, we've got our lesson here: Majestic Motherhood and Ridonculous Revivals, Gender Roles in the Second Great Awakening. We need to get our warm-up done. Then once you do that, we will talk about kind of some of our objectives. So first, something to understand with the American experiment, if you will, after about 1800, I think 1800 is probably safe. Yeah, I think that's safe. Is that there is going to be massive amounts of changes going on, and many of them are going to be simultaneously happening. So although we're going to, for example, if you're watching this as like an ongoing series on understanding U.S. history, although we do tend to do these as, episodes where we're focusing on a particular thing in one mini lesson, there's multiple things in U.S. history happening at the same time, right? And in many cases, they're interacting with each other, and that gets even more complicated. But it's just something that you want to be aware of. So what are we talking about first? The shift away from the patriarchal household economy towards Republican motherhood after the Revolutionary War. And then we will take some time and look at the focus and the impact of something called the Second Great Awakening. So let's go ahead. We're going to jump into Republican motherhood and talk about some changing gender roles for women and men. Okay, so our big kind of focus again is how these gender roles have shifted over time. Okay, gender identity and societal notions of gender never stay stagnant. They're always in a state of flux or change. Not necessarily forwards, as you will see here. Things do not always go in a straight linear fashion. And then we're also going to look at some outside factors that are going to look at how we perceive and understand gender, especially after the revolution, because that's going to add in a new element, if you will. Okay, this slide should be old, and the PHE, the patriarchal household economy. Okay, again, if you're like looking at the colonies from give or take 1700 to 1800, this is the way that society is kind of built and framed upon. The idea, again, patriarchal, the man is the head of the household unit. Okay, he literally owns his wife as property. That all being said, though, okay, besides being the head of the legal head and of the household, the idea of the household economy is that with everything being made inside the home, there is this kind of rough, and again I use this word very loosely, gender equity in that the family is thought of together as kind of this equal productive unit. Right? The idea that your family is going to attempt to be self-sufficient, that you're going to have this kind of rough sharing of, responsibility with inside the house. You're going to see here that is going to start to change. Let's kind of back up here, and for those who haven't spent a huge amount of time looking at how the ideas of Christianity intersect with gender, this may come as a surprise to you, but I'll help you out here. Okay, pre-1800. Okay, again, America having a large background in Protestant Christianity, there are thoughts and biases that go into each particular gender and how they, basically interact with sin, right? So pre-1800, women, not men, are thought of as the morally weaker sex and the temptresses, in Protestant theology. Okay, so again, pre-1800. Obviously, a little bit different today in terms of who's thought of as the sinful sex. Now, where does this all go back to? It goes back to the Bible, with Eve being the one who tempts Adam in the Garden of Eden to eat the forbidden fruit, right? And so at this time, men are thought to have been, the less sinful, morally uprighteous gender of the two, but that is going to start to change. Now, what's going to change it? A bunch of things. It's kind of things working in combination. There's this shift, and men are going to become the sinful sex. They're going to be the ones responsible for sexual misconduct, aggressiveness, predatory behavior, things like that. And part of the reason why this happens is that at the same time, there's this shift towards what we call Republican motherhood. Okay, so the revolution just happened, right? And then the question, and we'll start to understand this more as time goes on, is that as life in the United States is developing, there's this question: who's going to teach the children, quote unquote, this way to be virtuous and ethical in this new democracy? And so there's this idea that comes about called Republican motherhood. And it's the idea that women are going to be these repositories of Republican virtue and ethics, and they're going to inculcate their children, and kind of, for example, pass these things on. This also happens at the exact same time that the home is started to thought as a little bit differently than public life. Now, we haven't talked about the Industrial Revolution yet, but there's going to be changes in where work is happening. It's going to take time, but with work starting to happen a little bit more outside the home starts to get thought of as this refuge from public life. And women are going to be the masters of that area, according to this ideology. So this is going to be the start of an idea that we call separate spheres, that men and women have clearly defined, meaning separate roles. Now, again, notice, like, it seems great that women, now are being given this responsibility. That gives them power, to pass down the lessons of democracy and things like that. But remember, it's in the context of they're being confined increasingly away from being like as economically / productively involved as their husbands. Now, that all being said, you also see that this starts to change a little bit, even with something we'll do our next mini lesson on, which is called the Second Great Awakening. But yes, gender roles are things that are in flux, that are complicated. So go ahead, okay, on your notes, summarize the changing gender roles for men and women in exactly 7 words. Okay, and once you do that, I'll talk about our next steps. So again, pause the video if you need to right here, and then go on. The Second Great Awakening. What I'd like you to do before you get to this mini lesson is check out, okay, use the wheel and have it pick a random number for you, and check out one of these 7. I will tell you, they all have to deal with effects of the Second Great Awakening, and I want you to guess, using your source, what do you think the Second Great Awakening is about? Yes, it's going to be about religion. That's a safe assumption. But for example, if you pick 5, I'll just click 5 randomly, see what we get here. And I get a picture, okay, right here. And it says Route of the Mormon Pioneers, okay? I wonder what the Second Great Awakening is also going to be about. Okay, now again, I couldn't maybe necessarily tell this just based off this one picture, but maybe there's something in there that could be useful. I don't know. Okay, so think of yourself like an investigative journalist. What do you find interesting or peculiar? And then write a few ideas down on your note page, wherever you're using for that. Okay, we will take some time and we'll kind of break this down in class, but I don't want to spoil it for you here on the video. So if you're like, wait, don't go on. Don't worry, we're about to talk about the Second Great Awakening and what it was all about. That's going to be part 2 of our mini lesson. Okay. So what was the focus and impact of this thing called the Second Great Awakening? The first one was so good we have to have a second. So we're gonna be looking again at how religion interacts with society and how religion changed over time. American Protestantism is again development and expansion, right, are the theme of this unit. So what was the Second Great Awakening? So yes, just like the First Great Awakening, it was a spread of religious fervor, passion, etc. If you look at the time periods there, I say 1790s to 1840s. That again kind of depends on when you would define it. It has a couple of very, very big themes, though, that are different than the First Great Awakening. Okay, so the First Great Awakening, if you recall, okay, was about the old lights and the new lights and this kind of democratic expansion of access to religion. Again, this idea that, for example, like the Puritans just aren't holding on to power anymore. This is going to be a little bit different. So let's talk about some big themes. Okay, number one, predestination is not destiny. Okay, if you don't remember this is a Puritan idea. Puritanism or Calvinist idea, but it shows up with the Puritans too, that God had already chose who he had saved, okay, according to this old tenet of Calvinism, and this was called the elect. Instead, okay, your actions in life could affect your salvation is a key component of the Second Great Awakening. Like what you do on earth matters in terms of getting saved. And that's going to have some profound effects. We'll get to those in a second. And then again, number two, this one actually is similar to the First Great Awakening. It's developing a close personal relationship with that Jesus God thing. Some of these evangelizers, people spreading the word, that's what an evangelist means, okay, were Charles Finney, you can see here I'm on the left, and Peter Cartwright, okay, and if you see the two churches they're from, those were probably the two most popular forms of Protestant Christianity spreading at this time. That is Presbyterian and Methodist, okay. Also probably we could put Baptist in there. I think that would also be safe. But if you look here, okay, at our map, you can see that these guys are busy and they're traveling. And this part of New York, for example, goes through so many religious revivals that it becomes known as the burned over district, because like a wildfire, it just kind of gets burned out. And you can see we've got all these. If you look at the dots, you can get a preview of some of the effects of the Second Great Awakening. Mormons, anti-slavery churches. Wow, okay. So there's some crazy stuff happening here. So what I'd like you to do, okay, and this one you'll have to do on your own time, is I would like you to then go and check out some of these different bubbles that are effects of the Second Great Awakening. Because again, the big idea is that your public actions can assist in you getting saved, your salvation. And what that's going to do is that's going to help encourage some of the first big social reform movements, whether it's temperance, which is trying to stop people from drinking alcohol, asylum and penal reform, that's reforming prisons, women's rights, education, abolition, all really interesting things. So I'm going to leave it to you to check those out and write down some things you get out of it. And I will see you guys next time in the next video. Bye-bye.